other hand, it's saying that the US has to be the one who wins in the competition. Does that make sense? So there's an extreme contradiction between these two theories. There's, on the one hand, there's a theory of comparative advantage and free trade that's all about economic interdependence, an advantage that a lot of people read on different high school and college debate topics. So on the one hand, there's economic interdependence. On the other hand, there's economic competition and economic nationalism. And those two things, at a really fundamental level, do not square with one another. And especially not when you're talking about the narrative and the rhetoric. And that's kind of the contradiction that you've seen playing out in the US, is that on the one hand, people are arguing for deregulation of the economy, but on the other hand, they're making really protectionist arguments. Does that make sense? Like, in some ways, the rise of Trump kind of embodies this weird contradiction between deregulating the economy and rolling back taxes, and also buy America, America first. Does that make sense? That's kind of the contradiction. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. The theory of competitiveness has this major contradiction at the heart of it. I don't want to spend too much more time on competitiveness because I want to move on. We don't have that much time left, so we have barely talked about education. But hopefully that kind of makes sense so far. Everybody kind of with me? Okay, questions at this point. Totally okay if you're confused. Anyway. Okay, cool. So, competitiveness theory, it used to be about companies taking care of their big corporations so that those corporations would take care of their workers. The meaning of the term shifted in the late 1980s to be about countries attracting corporations in order to get something for their workers, and in the process, it created this serious contradiction between economic nationalism and economic interdependence. Does that make sense? Those things are at odds with one another. Okay, that's a big problem at the heart of this theory. Okay, so all of that is a background for a lot of what's going on in education policy. I really cannot stress enough how significant this is. Like, some of my academic work is about presidential address. All sorts of presidential candidates use this rhetoric when talking about immigration and when talking about the US education system, like all the time. So this isn't just like some obscure thing that like a couple people in some weird business journals talk about. This is like on the news, like front page kind of stuff. Okay, so the second element of this is, what's the relationship between education and competitiveness? Well, we don't just want to be, the theory at least, not necessarily want to agree with, but we don't just want to have people coming into the country who are smart. So we don't just want to be relying on other countries to produce smart people. If we're trying to get businesses to come to the US, we have to have a lot of smart people. So the theory is we want to have people with skills, okay? And that's a term that you'll see coming up all the time in educational literature. Skills, skills, skills. The concept of skills is very complicated. It sounds not very complicated. Skills, okay, you have an ability. Maybe you're really good at using Google and researching. That's a skill. It seems pretty simple. In reality, it's not that simple, because let's say that you, for example, as a debater, are like, well, I'm pretty good at my skill of research. So you apply for a job at a university. Maybe you don't really know a lot about it. You're like, university research job, I could probably do that. Maybe you're pretty good at researching, or maybe you have an older relative that's good at researching. You're imagining them, a college student. Here's the problem. There's a big difference between doing research in Google for debate and doing it for microbiology and doing it for journalism department and doing it as somebody who researches history. Those things are all different sorts of research. Does that make sense? So the purposes for the thing you're trying to do with that skill also matters. And it's the context for your skill. Does that make sense? You might say, I'm really good at computers. I'm really good with computers. Well, there's a big difference between video game design, cyber defense, somebody who's building hardware. Those things are all different ways of being good with computers. Make sense? So with skills, it's not just what you can do, but it's also the purpose to which you're putting the skill. Does that make sense? So that matters too, the context. There's also the issue of the extent to which you go into any job having to learn. So one of the expectations in most jobs when you take it is that you're going to learn part of what's going on with the job when you get there. Does that make sense? And it's always a delicate balance figuring out what does someone need to know before they go into a job and what can they expect to learn on the job. Does that make sense? So, for example, when I was in high school, I worked at Best Buy selling digital cameras, okay? When I was applying for this job, I didn't know anything about cameras. Not the first thing. And I only got the job working there selling cameras because they were like, well, you seem relatively personable, and that's what we care about. Does that make sense? Little did they know I was terrible at it, but you know, that's the theory behind it is, okay, so the skill that you have to have before you go into that job is not knowing anything about cameras, it's being able to have some people skills. That's a whole different problem. And they would teach you about the cameras when you went to the job. Does that make sense? I had to do like a week-long thing where they were like, let me tell you about all these Sony cameras or whatever. Super boring. So in any event, sometimes the skill is not what you think it is for a particular job. Does that make sense? Sometimes what you need to know going in is different than what you're actually going to be doing. So the skill doesn't always, what you imagine the job to be is not always the skill that you need. Because sometimes they want to teach you some of that stuff on the job. So there's the context in which you're deploying the skill, and then there's the whole issue of what you need to know beforehand versus what you'll learn while you're doing it. Does that make sense? So skills start to get pretty complicated. On top of that, as we said before, there's the issue of specialization. Some skills are extremely specialized, and they only matter in very, very specific contexts. Does that make sense? So, for example, there is an extremely specific branch of material scientists who makes gels that cool really, really fast computer units, okay? It's a very specific branch of material science. And the only thing that these gels are really used for is cooling the computers that run financial markets, and that's it. Does that make sense? That's a very specific, specialized skill. Does that make sense? Now imagine somebody overnight invents a new way to cool those things that's a lot cheaper and more efficient. You're out of a job. Nobody cares about your ability to make these gels anymore. Does that make sense? So that's the other problem with skills is that sometimes a lot of times actually, they're very, very specialized. And if something changes in the market that you're in, your skill doesn't matter anymore. Does that make sense? So overnight, you can go from making tons of money, having a really good specialized job, to having no job at all because your skills don't matter anymore. Does that make sense? So you got a couple of different problems here. You got the level of specialization of the skill. You've got the purpose to which the skill is being put. You've got the issue of what you're learning on the job versus what you have to know before you go into the job. Does that make sense? These are all very complicated things. A lot of different elements. So skill is actually very complicated. One of the concepts that economists use to characterize skill is called human capital. Okay? The basic premise behind human capital is that you can think of yourself kind of like a factory or any other kind of infrastructural system. I'll explain that in a little more detail. That's a very bad word. So, for example, it makes more sense in a particular context. Say, for example, that you want to become a computer scientist. Does that make sense? And the company that's hiring you, maybe the computer science company that you're working for, is a cyber defense company that protects people against hackers and identity theft. Does that make sense? There's two kinds of investment that are happening there for that company. The company is investing in the computers themselves, the software, the hardware, all that stuff, and they're investing in the people who actually control the computers and make sure and build the hardware and design the software. Does that make sense? So there's capital refers to any kind of fixed asset. That could be computers, it could be the robots that build a car in a factory, that could be the laptop that you brought with you to the camp. Economists might characterize any of these things as fixed capital. Does that make sense? Some good that you use to build more stuff. So in the context of the cyber defense firm we're talking about, both you as the person with skills and the computers themselves and the software, those things are all capital. Does that make sense? So human capital is your level of knowledge or skill. The investment that you put into yourself, learning skills and ideas and tricks of the trade that enable you to work at that cyber defense firm. Does that make sense? So you're sort of thinking of yourself like a company in that sense. You are, the term people in the economics literature uses, you are an entrepreneur of yourself. You're making yourself basically into a company in which you are trying to sell your skills to other people. Does that make sense? So that's the theory of human capital. That you are working on yourself in the same way that a business works on its robots or its computers to make sure that it's running efficiently. Okay? So the problem with human capital is that it's very difficult to tell how much human capital any given person has. There's other problems with it too that we'll get to in a second. But from the economics literature, it's very hard to tell how much human capital a person has. Does that make sense? You can't do a rigorous 3-day interview process every time you want to hire a worker. You know, Best Buy can't interview every person for days on end. The interview I did was like 15 minutes long. Does that make sense? It's a relatively low level of human capital. But what do you do to solve that problem? You submit a resume or a CV. And what that does, the various little markers on that CV or resume do, is they signal your human capital. Does that make sense? So you want to go work for the cyber defense company, and they say submit a resume. If you went to Harvard and got a computer, or MIT or Caltech and got a computer science degree, that is a signal to the business that you're smart. That's what it's supposed to be signaling. Does that make sense? And even more than whatever you learned in the classroom, the value of those degrees, and the reason people are willing to spend $50,000 on a degree at one of those schools per year, is because it signals to future employees that that person is smart. Does that make sense? So the business doesn't have time to interview that person for days on end, but they can look at thousands of resumes and sort them according to the signals they're getting about people's human capital. Does that make sense? So the theory in the literature is that you're acquiring skills that when you're thinking about those skills, you're imagining yourself sort of as a company that you're investing in every time you pay for education or every time you pay for school. Does that make sense? And that signal that you invested, that you're smart, will be sent to employers and will help you get hired. And employers, if you're running a business, that you're looking for those signals to try and find the best workers. Does that make sense? Now, one of the problems with human capital, apart from all of the incoherence of the theory, is that signals aren't just what school did you go to. There's a whole bunch of other kind of signals involved, a lot of which are super gendered or racist. So there's a lot of problems with human capital just on its face, that doing it this way is somewhere between a dog whistle and a signal, and it's not always clear which one it is. But according to this theory, according to the theory of human capital, what educational policy should be doing is creating higher levels of human capital in the population. Does that make sense? So the basic premise is, let's make it so that we have a population where businesses, when they're making decisions about where to locate, they're like, man, we really want to go to the US because they've got a ton of really smart people there. We've got a bunch of doctors, they can do genetic research, they've got a whole bunch of engineers, those people can do computer science or chemical engineering or aerospace. So, we can go to the US and we can be rest assured that the US is just going to be pumping out smart people all the time out of these universities and high schools. Does that make sense? So the premise behind this whole thing, coming back around to competitiveness, is that the way that you compete is by having a high level of human capital in your population. And keep in mind, remember, human capital, according to this theory, human capital is supposed to signal the level of skills that are present in the population. So this is a very complex process of signaling back and forth using resumes and whatever else to say how much human capital you have. But at the end of the day, all that is supposed to mean is when you're sitting, for example, in front of a computer, what can you do with the computer? Does that make sense? That's what it's all supposed to get back to, is you are in a very specific situation, in an embodied context. You're selling cameras to somebody, you're trying to stop a hacker from stealing somebody's identity, and you have to be able to do it. Does that make sense? You have to be able to just sit down and do it. So all of this stuff is about getting to the point where we have a lot of people who can do stuff that's really hard to do. Does that make sense? At the very most basic level. And so educational policy that's built on these assumptions is saying that the thing we should be focusing on is allowing students to acquire skills so that as national policymakers, we can convince a lot of companies that are making high-tech stuff to come here. And in the process, we'll have a population where the wages are relatively high because those jobs are hard to do and they take a lot of time to learn how to do. Does that make sense? Because those jobs are hard to do and they take a lot of time to learn how to do, there's relatively few people that can do them. And that means that if we can build a population where we have a lot of people who are capable of doing them, we'll get companies that pay good wages to come here, and then the well-being of the country will be relatively high. Does that make sense? That's the basic theory. It seems pretty sensible. Probably you've seen some of the stuff, if you've done any kind of preseason work, or maybe you came across this last year on some of the stuff with China policy. There was a couple people who were talking about stuff like this. Okay, well, there's a bunch of problems with this. This theory, you're like, oh, this narrative kind of makes sense. No, it's actually really stupid. It seems to make sense, but it doesn't make any sense at all. Here's the problem. Okay, when you read about this stuff, people are like, the U.S. is falling behind. we're not producing enough engineers, we got to get more people out. You know, China, they've got so many people that are MAs in engineering. India, there's 1,000 people that are, 1,000 times more people that are getting computer science degrees. Here's the problem. The whole theory, remember, the whole reason for doing all of this is the premise that high-tech jobs pay people pretty well. Does that make sense? Why do they pay people pretty well? Somebody, who knows? I just said, yeah.
There are not that many people who can do it.
There are not that many people that can do it. The labor force is very tight. There's not a lot of people who can do it. So as a worker, you have more ability to compete for wages. Problem, if every country is doing this, then suddenly there's a lot of people who can do it. That doesn't really work anymore. Does that make sense? So the whole premise of this theory is that, oh, well, wages will be really high because not very many people can do this job. So let's everybody try and do these jobs. And then you're training tons of people, and now there are a lot of people who can do the jobs. So now the workers don't have any ability to bargain for wages. This situation actually plays out oftentimes in the United States. So there's a big debate about whether it's actually true that there are a relatively small number of people, that there's a lot of, okay, let me back up for a second. One of the claims that is made is that there are a lot of job openings for high-skilled jobs. There's companies just can't get enough of these people. There's job openings everywhere. Companies need somebody who can do advanced math or some advanced engineering projects. There's just no way they can find enough people, and that's why we need to change our education policy. The problem is that there's a lot of people who say, well, that's just not true. That there's a lot of people that are unemployed that have a master's degree in chemical engineering or a PhD in computer science. Or if they're not unemployed, because they have a lot of education, they can probably get a job somewhere, they're underemployed, which means they're not getting paid very much and they're not in the field that they trained to be in. Does that make sense? If you have a PhD in computer science and you have a job working for the Geek Squad at Best Buy, I mean, sure, you're employed, but as someone who spent a lot of time with those people, I can tell you, they did not love their jobs. They did not love either. If you had a PhD in computer science, you'd be like, this sucks. I don't want to be fixing people's Xboxes. This is the worst. So they have jobs, but they're underemployed. Does that make sense? So there's a big debate about whether this is even true, that we actually need more people doing these jobs. And this is going to be a huge subject of debate on this topic. There's a ton of cards both ways. The people are constantly pumping out. And part of the problem is, as the question earlier asked, well, how do you know about all this stuff in the political economy? It's so complicated. Well, the answer is that nobody really knows for sure. There's 20 different indicators that thousands of different people are using. There's thousands of different narratives that people have used to interpret those indicators. So it's very complicated. We don't really know. Does that make sense? You can think about trying to figure out the actual level of skill of the population as being a little bit like living in the 1920s and trying to figure out what kind of cell X was versus cell Y was. Because your technology for doing that is not very sophisticated. Does that make sense? You don't really have a good enough microscope to figure it out. And that's kind of the situation with the economy. We don't really have a good enough microscope to know what the level of skill in the population is versus the number of jobs that are available. Does that make sense? We just don't really have the technology, and it's so complicated that we can't really look directly at it. Does that make sense? In the same way that you can't see a skill, or a cell, sorry, with your naked eye. Similar level of complexity, okay? So there's this whole theory of human capital. There's a lot of problems with that. If you make it so that the human capital of the population is going up, other countries will compete with you, wages will go down, and then what was the point in the first place? Does that make sense? So that becomes kind of a complex problem. One of the justifications for this, and there's a whole bunch, I just want to say, there's a whole bunch of debate about this. One of the key terms that people use in this literature is STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. This term is going to come up a ton on this topic. I worked at a camp before this at KU, and like 4 apps, I think, explicitly dealt with STEM, like 2 of them in their plans. So this concept is going to come up a lot. And there's, just with this concept itself, there's disagreement about whether or not there's worker shortages in STEM fields. There's disagreement about whether this term means anything. Some people think we need the M should be medicine. Some people think that the E should be big and the other letter should be small because engineering is more important. Seriously, it gets pretty dumb. I read an education journal where it was like, S, T, E, M, and there was another one that was like this, and you were just like, okay, I'm done. This is getting deleted from my hard drive. I don't need this. So there's a lot of debate about, which one's which, okay? So there's debate about worker shortages. There's a debate about if this term is meaningful. There's a debate about whether or not the government's job is to provide workforce training for businesses. That's a huge debate. So all of this stuff about whether or not the government can predict where labor shortages are going to be, blah, blah, blah. So there's a huge debate about this. I just want you to understand the basic background and concepts. Yeah?
Is the purpose of these educational policies, is it to achieve maximum allocated efficiency in the separate countries, or is it only to force an inflation of the high skilled workers?
Well, now you're getting at the real question, aren't you? So there's, hopefully you all can sort of understand, Rohit, is that right? The question that Rohit's asking here is a very good one. There's a huge debate about that too, which is the purpose of all of this rhetoric and narrative, this is the reason I say narratives are very important for international political economy, although many political economists, increasingly they study them, but a lot of them used to not study them. The question is whether there's actually an issue with the efficiency of allocation. So do we have enough workers for these various jobs? Are there enough of them in each of the various countries that need them? Maximum allocated efficiency, where you don't want to move any workers because everything's perfectly balanced. Or is the purpose just to drive more people into the STEM fields so that you can pay people less? And that's a huge debate. There's a lot of people who say, everybody keeps coming up making these fake studies that say that there's a shortage of workers, because then we can justify producing more workers, and then we can pay them all less. Does that make sense? The same thing's true in the context of immigration debates, where people say, we don't really need all these people on H-1B visas, we're just bringing them in to drive down wages. That's the whole purpose of this, is making US workers and immigrants compete against one another. So there's a big debate about that, and it's not, honestly, that's not clear. That's a really good question. So that's basically, the concept of STEM is very important because that's the particular, that's the particular set of skills that people are trying to develop. So there's competition between countries to attract businesses. The theory is you want to have a high level of human capital, which signals your skills in the population, and those skills should particularly be in science, technology, engineering, and math, which are the most important part of the economy. Everybody making sense so far? So that's the whole theory behind this. Yes, your question.
What exactly is allocated efficiency?
It's basically just the efficiency of resource allocation. So making sure that the way that resources and money and goods are distributed is such that you could not make any one person worse off, or sorry, better off without making somebody else worse off. Does that make sense? And the theory is that it's possible if in a system, what people call I forget the Pareto optimum situation, that nobody could be made better off without making someone worse off. Does that make sense? There's an inefficient distribution of resources if someone's lot in life could be improved without anybody else's being made worse. Does that make sense? So that's called Pareto optimality. It's about maximum allocated efficiency. Okay. So STEM is the field that people are going into. Okay? Really briefly, because we only have a couple of minutes, I'm going to zoom through two things that are related to this. Okay? One, very fast. First is that the reason that STEM is so important is because of what people call a shift to the knowledge economy. Okay? Maybe you've seen some of the news about automation and like robots are going to take all of our jobs. So the argument people are making is, well, robots are going to take all the jobs that don't involve any skills. You know, checking someone out at a grocery store or whatever. Those things are easy. We have robots do that, or people can do that for themselves at auto checkout. So the thing that those skills are going to be needed for in the knowledge economy is people programming the robots, telling them what to do, building them, maintaining them. Does that make sense? So the real intellectual part of that is in the design of the robots, the blueprints, the ideas. That's where all the labor, the really valuable labor comes in. Having ideas and generating those designs. Does that make sense? So the reason STEM is so important is that you need smart people who can help you get patents. Patents are protection for your ideas to make sure that you get money from them. So you want to have a lot of people who can get you patents. And if you do that, then you'll control the economy as it starts to get more and more automated. Does that make sense, basically? Okay, cool. So that's the knowledge economy concept, but in brief. It's more and more about designs, blueprints, ideas, intellectual property. And that means you want to have a whole bunch of people in these fields getting patents for you so that you get the money from the ideas, because that's where all the real cash is. Okay, that's one. Second thing, really quickly, is this is the justification and the reason for the need for school choice and assessment. Okay? So school choice, the principle is our school system should work on the same model of competition that we have for businesses at the international level. Does that make sense? Students, like companies, should be able to leave a school if they think it's crappy and go to another school. And that will force schools, like countries, to have to try and attract students. Does that make sense? It's all built on the same model, but it involves some of the same contradictions. So that's the principle behind school choice. Assessment is a means of allowing teachers and students and schools and parents to figure out what the level of human capital a school is producing is. Does that make sense? I said human capital signal. So how do you signal it? Well, for people that are 10 years old, you want to make them take a standardized test. And that will tell students, parents, teachers, colleges, whoever else, what the level of achievement for a particular population is. Does that make sense? It's supposed to signal the relative level of human capital. Does that make sense? Kind of. Hope it doesn't make too much sense, because again, it's kind of dumb. But, there's at least a theory there. Okay, so that's the principle behind assessments, is that they're signaling human capital. Does that make sense? So you want to build a school system that models the competitive system of the international political economy, and you want to have assessments so that you're constantly signaling your level of human capital, and so that students can decide to leave a school if they have much higher test scores than everybody else and go to another school where everybody else has high test scores. Teachers can leave a school if that school is not very good, but they're teaching well. Schools can fire teachers who they don't think are performing well enough. They can evaluate teacher performance based upon how their students do on standardized tests. That's the principle behind all of this, is that you're supposed to be trying to figure out what level of skills you're producing so that you can get more students out, put a high level of human capital. Your school will get more rewards, the students will get better jobs, the country will have a higher level of human capital, it'll attract better companies, and wages will go up. Does that make sense? That's the principle behind all this reform. The problem, of course, as we said, is that there's a contradiction between competitiveness and economic interdependence. That the concept of human capital has a whole bunch of internal contradictions. The purpose for which you're gaining the skill, the extent to which you have pre-existing ability versus on-the-job training, the specialization of the skill, and the problem that you could easily get de-skilled by automation out of a job. So there's all those problems with it. And there's the problem that as more people become high-skilled, the relative level of skill in the population goes up, and then wages start to go down. Does that make sense? So there's all these problems with the system, and there's a whole bunch more that we're not even talking about. Like one thing, very quickly, that is a huge, huge problem for this theory that really, I think, is a fundamental issue that nobody in the literature talks very much about, is how do you measure someone's potential ability, their actual ability, and then separate both of those things from the particular environment in which they've existed. Does that make sense? So it's very hard to tell whether people that are wealthy or the kids of people that are wealthy are smart because they have a lot of potential, they have a very high level of existing ability, or they've simply benefited from having access to better schools, better nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? So it's very hard to dissociate all those factors from one another. So despite all this stuff with human capital and signaling, at the root of it, it involves signaling something that is so abstract and difficult to suss out that it may just be completely incoherent. And that makes the entire project very suspect. Does that make sense? So it can be very complicated. So hopefully this gives you some sense of the background political economic factors that are driving immigration policy, or education policy, and immigration policy, and kind of shaping some of the debates that people are having in the policy literature back and forth. Anybody else have any final questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, stand up and stretch just for a second, and we'll introduce the teaching staff, and we'll take you off to your first meeting with your